My name is Olivia. I'm 38 years old, and I'm currently being hunted by my own family for my late son's $1.5 million inheritance, the same son whose funeral they were too busy to attend. The smell of lilies used to be my favorite. Now it just tastes like dust and death. I sat in the front pew of the St. Jude's Chapel, my fingers white-knuckled as I gripped a crumpled tissue. The wood was hard and unforgiving against my back. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sniffles of 100 people, Leo's friends from the university, his old high school soccer teammates, neighbors who remembered him as the boy who always offered to mow their lawns for free. The air was heavy with a collective, silent grief, but it was the silence directly to my right that was screaming. I stared at the 3 empty seats reserved for family: my mother, Margaret, my sister, Sienna, my brother-in-law, empty, just polished oak and the flickering shadow of a prayer candle. My phone buzzed in my black clutch. I knew I shouldn't look. Not here with the priest clearing his throat to begin the eulogy for my 19-year-old son, but my thumb moved on its own. Mom, Olivia, honey, I'm so sorry. This migraine is just debilitating. I haven't left the darkened bedroom all morning. The stress of losing Leo has just shattered my nervous system. Sienna is a wreck, too. She's been crying so hard she can't catch her breath. We just can't make it. Please try to understand. We're grieving in our own way. A cold, sharp laugh bubbled in my throat, but I choked it back, turning it into a sob. I looked up at the mahogany casket. Leo was in there, my brilliant, kind, tech genius boy who used to stay up until 2 a.m. explaining blockchain architecture to me while I pretended to understand. He was gone because a driver decided a text message was more important than a red light, and my mother was grieving with a headache. "Olivia?" a soft voice whispered. I looked up. It was Sarah, Leo's girlfriend. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face puffy. She reached out and took my hand. "Are they coming?" I looked at the empty seats one last time, then back at the girl who had spent every night for the last week sleeping on my living room floor so I wouldn't be alone. "No," I whispered. My voice sounded like broken glass. "They aren't coming." The service began. The priest spoke of life eternal and the brightness of youth, but all I could feel was the hollow space in my chest. Every time the heavy doors at the back of the chapel creaked open, my heart took a pathetic little leap, hoping to see a familiar blonde head or hear the click of my mother's heels, but the doors only let in the wind. By the time we stood for the final prayer, I realized something that should have hurt more than it did. My family hadn't just skipped a funeral, they had abandoned Leo, and in doing so, they had finally, irrevocably lost me too. Or so I thought. I didn't realize then that for people like Margaret and Sienna, loss is only a tragedy when it involves a dollar sign. My name is Olivia. I'm 38 years old, and I'm currently being hunted by my own family for my late son's $1.5 million inheritance, the same son whose funeral they were too busy to attend. The smell of lilies used to be my favorite. Now it just tastes like dust and death. I sat in the front pew of the St. Jude's Chapel, my fingers white-knuckled as I gripped a crumpled tissue. The wood was hard and unforgiving against my back. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sniffles of 100 people, Leo's friends from the university, his old high school soccer teammates, neighbors who remembered him as the boy who always offered to mow their lawns for free. The air was heavy with a collective, silent grief, but it was the silence directly to my right that was screaming. I stared at the 3 empty seats reserved for family. My mother, Margaret, my sister, Sienna, my brother-in-law, empty, just polished oak and the flickering shadow of a prayer candle. My phone buzzed in my black clutch. I knew I shouldn't look, not here with the priest clearing his throat to begin the eulogy for my 19-year-old son, but my thumb moved on its own. Mom, Olivia, honey, I'm so sorry. This migraine is just debilitating. I haven't left the darkened bedroom all morning. The stress of losing Leo has just shattered my nervous system. Sienna is a wreck, too. She's been crying so hard she can't catch her breath. We just can't make it. Please try to understand. We're grieving in our own way. A cold, sharp laugh bubbled in my throat, but I choked it back, turning it into a sob. I looked up at the mahogany casket. Leo was in there, my brilliant, kind, tech genius boy who used to stay up until 2 a.m. explaining blockchain architecture to me while I pretended to understand. He was gone because a driver decided a text message was more important than a red light. And my mother was grieving with a headache. "Olivia?" a soft voice whispered. I looked up. It was Sarah, Leo's girlfriend. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face puffy. She reached out and took my hand. "Are they coming?" I looked at the empty seats one last time, then back at the girl who had spent every night for the last week sleeping on my living room floor so I wouldn't be alone. "No," I whispered. My voice sounded like broken glass. "They aren't coming." The service began. The priest spoke of life eternal and the brightness of youth, but all I could feel was the hollow space in my chest. Every time the heavy doors at the back of the chapel creaked open, my heart took a pathetic little leap, hoping to see a familiar blonde head or hear the click of my mother's heels. But the doors only let in the wind. By the time we stood for the final prayer, the doorbell didn't just ring, it demanded. It was 3 sharp, impatient bursts that cut through the silence of my Sunday morning. I was sitting in my bathrobe, staring at a photo of Leo from his graduation cap tilted at a rakish angle. I opened the door to find a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and the blinding flash of a white-toothed smile. "Olivia, darling, you look like you need a drink," my mother said, gliding past me without waiting for an invitation. She was wearing a crisp, cream-colored linen suit, hardly the attire of a woman recovering from a debilitating migraine. Behind her followed Sienna, her blonde hair perfectly blown out, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a bottle of expensive-looking Prosecco. "Hey, Liv," she said, her voice airy as if we had seen each other yesterday, rather than her skipping her only nephew's funeral. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat. I stood by the open door, refusing to close it. "We've been so worried about you," Margaret chirped, setting her designer handbag on my kitchen island. She started opening my cabinets, looking for glasses. "We knew you'd be spiraling, and then we heard the news. Imagine, our little Leo a millionaire." My stomach turned. "How did you find out?" "The neighborhood is a small place, Olivia," Sienna said, sliding into a bar stool and peeling the foil off the bottle. "And honestly, why didn't you tell us? We're family." "Family?" I echoed. "You weren't family at the funeral. You weren't family for the last 3 weeks." Margaret paused, a wine glass in each hand. Her face shifted instantly into a mask of wounded motherhood. "Olivia, please, don't be cruel. You know how sensitive my nerves are. I was in a dark room for days. But we're here now, aren't we? To help you manage this burden." She poured the wine. The bubbles hissed in the silence. "It's not a burden," I said, finally closing the door and walking into the kitchen. "It was Leo's hard work. It's his legacy." "Exactly!" Margaret clapped her hands together. "And what better way to honor that legacy than by supporting the people he loved? Sienna, show her." Sienna pulled her phone out and swiped through a gallery of photos. She slid the phone across the counter toward me. I saw a sprawling, ultra-modern house with floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a negative-edge pool, and a view of the Hollywood Hills. "It's a creator mansion, Liv," her eyes gleaming with a hunger I'd seen many times before. "There's a group of us, influencers, stylists, ready to move in. It's in the best part of LA. If I get in now, my brand will explode. It's only $1.2 million. A steal, really." I stared at the photo, then at my sister's expectant face. "You want me to give you $1.2 million for a creator mansion?" "Not give," Margaret corrected, sipping her wine. "Invest. It's what Leo would have wanted. He was a tech boy. He understood the digital world. He'd want his aunt to be a star. Besides, what are you going to do with all that money? It'll just sit in a bank reminding you of the tragedy. This way, something beautiful comes out of it." The audacity was a physical weight in the room. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to shop. They were treating my son's death like a lottery win. "No," I said. The room went cold. Margaret's smile didn't drop, it just sharpened. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. The war didn't start with a shout. It started with a notification. 2 days after the kitchen confrontation, my phone began to vibrate incessantly. It was Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, a woman who usually only contacted me to forward chain emails about miracle cures or to brag about her roses. Aunt Linda: "Olivia, I am appalled. Your mother is in literal pieces. She tells me you're refusing to share Leo's blessing with the family. After all she's sacrificed to raise you, grief does strange things to the mind, dear, but this level of greed is unchristian. Think about your poor sister's future." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't reply. But then came the Facebook post. I logged on to find my mother had shared a vague booked status that was anything but vague. "It's heartbreaking when money changes people. I lost my grandson, and now it feels like I've lost my daughter to the spirit of avarice. Pray for her heart to soften before she pushes her family away forever. Broken heart." The comments were a bloodbath. Neighbors I'd known for a decade were liking it. Distant cousins were commenting with "Amen" and "so sad." I was being painted as the villain in my own tragedy, the cold, calculating mother who was profiting from her son's death. By Friday, the isolation felt like a physical weight. I couldn't go to the grocery store without feeling the burn of judgment from someone in the produce aisle. I retreated deeper into my house, finally finding sanctuary in the one place I had avoided: Leo's bedroom. The air in there was still. Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon light cutting across his unmade bed. I sat in his ergonomic gaming chair, the leather cool against my skin. On his desk, his dual monitor setup sat dark, like two giant blind eyes. I started tidying, mostly just to keep my hands from shaking. I stacked his coding manuals by height. I picked up a stray sock. Then, tucked behind his tower of computer equipment, I felt something hard and metallic. It was his small vlogging camera. Leo had always talked about starting a YouTube channel to document his coding journey. I plugged the camera into his laptop, my breath hitching as the screen flickered to life. There were dozens of files. Most were just screen recordings of him explaining lines of Python code, but one file was titled Family Vent June 12th.mp4. June 12th? That was only 2 weeks before the accident. I clicked play. Leo's face filled the screen. He looked tired, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was stressed. "Hey guys," his voice rang out, so clear it felt like he was standing behind me. "Just needed to record this so I don't feel like I'm going crazy. Grandma Margaret called again today. She found out about the quick code sale. I don't even know how. She spent 40 minutes on the phone trying to guilt-trip me into loaning her $10,000 for her credit card debt. She told me not to tell Mom because Olivia is too high-strung and doesn't understand high finance. Unreal. He sighed, leaning back. She actually told me that if I didn't help her, she'd have to sell her house, and it would be my fault she was homeless. I love her, but the greed is getting out of hand. I'm glad Mom is the beneficiary. The bistro was the kind of place where the waiters wore white aprons, and the ambient noise was a low hum of clinking silverware and expensive conversations. It was the special occasion spot in town, the place where my mother always insisted on going when she wanted to feel important. I arrived early. I chose a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. I ordered a glass of iced water and placed my tablet face down on the table. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribs, but my hands were steady. For the first time since the accident, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to the world, I was about to change it. At exactly 1:05 p.m., they made their entrance. Margaret and Sienna didn't walk in, they performed. Margaret was draped in a silk scarf that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, her face glowing with a triumphant "I told you so" radiance. Sienna was right behind her, her eyes darting around the room to see if anyone was watching. She was already dressed for her new life in Los Angeles, a trendy crop top, oversized blazer, and a designer bag looped over her arm. "Olivia, oh darling, I knew you'd come around," Margaret cooed, sliding into the booth and immediately reaching for my hand. Her skin felt like cold parchment. I pulled my hand back to adjust my napkin. "Hey, Liv," Sienna said, a smug grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. She dropped a thick, glossy folder onto the white tablecloth. "I brought the paperwork for the house. The realtor says there's another offer on the table, so we really need to move fast, like wire the deposit today fast." I looked at the folder. The cover featured a picture of the Creator Mansion with its infinity pool glowing blue. "You've been busy," I said quietly. "We just want what's best for everyone," Margaret said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "Think of it as a fresh start for the family. We've all been through so much trauma. This money, it's a way to heal. We can all spend summers in LA. It'll be like a tribute to Leo's success." "A tribute," I repeated. The word felt like ash in my mouth. "Is that why you skipped the funeral, Mom? To prepare for this healing?" Margaret's expression didn't even flicker. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Olivia, we've moved past that. I told you I was unwell, but let's focus on the positive. I've already told Aunt Linda and the rest of the family that you've seen the light. Everyone is so happy that you're finally doing the right thing." Sienna opened the folder, pointing to a line on a contract. "If you could just sign here to authorize the transfer to the escrow account, I can have the movers at your place by Monday to help you pack up Leo's room. We should probably just donate his stuff, right? No point in hauling it to California." The casualness with which she suggested throwing away my son's life made the world tilt on its axis. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw nothing but a bottomless pit of want. "I actually have something I want to show you first." The video wasn't long, but in the silence of the booth, every word from Leo felt like a physical blow. When he reached the part about Margaret's high finance manipulation, her face turned a shade of mottled purple I'd never seen before. He was just a boy," Margaret stammered as the screen went black. She reached for her Chardonnay, her hand shaking so badly the glass clattered against her teeth. "He didn't understand. I was trying to teach him about family responsibility." by lying to me and guilt-tripping a teenager?" I asked. My voice was low, cutting through her excuses. "Olivia, this is a private family matter," Sienna hissed, looking around nervously to see if the patrons at the next table were eavesdropping. "Why are you bringing up old drama when we're trying to build a future?" "Because the past defines the future, Sienna," I said. I swiped the screen of the tablet. "And speaking of family responsibility, let's talk about the funeral, the day you both were too distraught to stand by my side." "We've been over this," Margaret snapped, her voice rising an octave. "I had a migraine. I was in agony." "That's funny," I said, sliding the tablet toward her, "because according to the Azure Day Spa Instagram page, you were tagged in a photo at 11:30 a.m., right as the opening prayer began. You're in a white robe, Mom. You have a cucumber-infused water in your hand. You look remarkably pain-free." Margaret froze. Her eyes darted to the screen where a screenshot of the post was displayed. There she was, smiling next to her friend Brenda, with the caption, "Much needed pampering day with my bestie. #self-care, #luxury. And Sienna," I swiped again, "you were tagged in your boyfriend's story at a boozy brunch downtown. You weren't crying. In fact, you were doing a choreographed dance to a pop song." The silence that followed was deafening. The waiter approached with their wine, but I waved him away. The air in the booth felt electric, charged with the sudden collapse of their lies. I needed a distraction," Sienna muttered, her bravado finally cracking. "I couldn't handle the grief. People process things differently, Olivia. You're being so judgmental." "I'm being observant," I corrected. "You didn't care enough to show up for his goodbye, but you cared enough to show up for his bank account. You both stood in my kitchen and talked about healing and tributes while you were browsing for mansions and getting massages during his burial." Margaret slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "Enough! So we made a mistake. We're human. But that money is still in this family, and as your mother, I am telling you—" "You aren't telling me anything ever again," I said. I felt a strange, cold lightness in my chest. The power they had held over me for 38 years, the guilt, the need for their approval, it was evaporating. I stood up, picking up my tablet. "Where are you going?" Sienna cried, clutching the real estate folder as if it were a life raft. "What about the deposit? The realtor needs an answer." "Oh, I have an answer," I said, looking down at them. "But you're not going to like it." I watched the color drain from Sienna's face as she realized the creator mansion was slipping through her fingers like sand. She looked at the folder on the table, the glossy dream of her influencer life, and then back at me, her eyes filling with a desperate, ugly kind of tears. "Olivia, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I already told people I was moving. I've already started the branding for the house. If I don't get this, I'll be a laughingstock." "Then I suggest you start practicing your punchline," I said. Margaret stood up, her chair screeching against the tile floor. She didn't look like a grieving grandmother or a high society matron anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. "You can't do this, Olivia. That money is millions of dollars. It's enough to change all our lives. You have no right to hoard it out of spite." "I'm not hoarding it," I said, and for the first time in weeks, a genuine smile touched my lips. "I spent the morning with Arthur Henderson. We finalized everything." Margaret's eyes widened. You moved the money? To where?" "I established the Leo Vance Future Coders Scholarship," I said, enunciating every word. $500,000 has been donated to the State University's Computer Science Department. It will provide full rides for kids from families who actually support their dreams, kids who don't have grandmothers trying to steal their savings. Sienna let out a strangled sob. $500,000? Olivia, that was my house. And the rest?
Margaret hissed, her fingers clawing at the edge of the table. "You can't give it all away. You have bills. You have—" "The rest is in a locked, irrevocable trust. It's a retirement fund that I can't touch for 20 years. And here's the best part. The trust is structured so that it can never be used as collateral, it can't be gifted, and it can't be accessed by anyone other than me, not even in a lawsuit." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a golden goose being cooked and served. "You've ruined us, after everything I did for you." "You did nothing for me, Mom," I said, my voice rising just enough to capture the attention of the surrounding tables. "You used me as a buffer and a bank. You skipped my son's funeral to get a facial. You didn't want a memory. You wanted a windfall. Well, the wind just changed direction." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of printed photos, the spa shots, the brunch shots, and a transcript of Leo's video. I dropped.
6 months later, the world had kept turning, though it felt like a different planet than the one I'd inhabited before. The silence in my house was no longer hollow. It was a choice. I had changed the locks, blocked every number associated with my former life, and deleted my social media accounts. The family war had been a storm that blew through, leaving wreckage in its wake, but the air afterward was finally clear. I stood on the campus of the State University, the wind whipping my hair across my face. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind Leo would have loved, perfect for wearing flannels and drinking way too much espresso. I was there for the first official ceremony of the Leo Vance Future Coders Scholarship. I watched as a young woman named Maya, a first-generation student with thick glasses and a nervous, brilliant smile, stood at the podium. She talked about how she had almost dropped out because she couldn't afford the tuition, and how this scholarship had been her miracle. I didn't sit in the front row. I sat in the back, blending in with the other parents and students. When they played a short slideshow of Leo, his face lighting up as he explained a piece of code, his graduation photo, his goofy grin, I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because he was still here. Every time Maya wrote a line of code, a part of my son was changing the world. After the ceremony, I drove to the cemetery. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the hum of the city. I walked the familiar path, my boots crunching on the fallen leaves. I wasn't carrying a heavy heart or a tablet full of receipts today. I was just carrying a single, vibrant yellow sunflower, Leo's favorite. I reached the headstone. It was simple, elegant granite. Leo Vance, 19 years of light. Code is poetry in motion. I knelt and brushed a stray leaf off the base. "The scholarship is doing great, Leo. You helped a girl named Maya today. She's going to build big things, just like you." I sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind in the oaks. I thought about Margaret and Sienna. The last I'd heard through the grapevine, Sienna was living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a gritty part of LA with 4 other influencers, still waiting for a big break that would never come. My mother was reportedly living in a self-imposed exile, her reputation in our town so tarnished that even the ladies at her bridge club had stopped calling. They had wanted the $1.5 million to build walls of luxury around themselves. They had wanted to use Leo's death to buy a lifestyle they hadn't earned. In the end, the money hadn't saved me either. It hadn't brought Leo back, but it had given me the one thing money usually destroys in families like mine: the truth. It had acted like a spotlight, showing me exactly who people were when the masks fell away. I stood up and smoothed my coat. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the daughter trying to earn a love that was always conditional. I was just Olivia,
I was a mother who had loved her son and a woman who had finally learned to love herself enough to walk away from the poison. As I walked back to my car, I didn't look back at the empty rows or the ghosts of the past. I looked at the horizon. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the colors of a new beginning. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in 38 years, I was finally, beautifully free.